Welcome back to the Pursuit Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Rose. I am so excited for today's episode because we are going to be talking about space and robots and medical mishaps. But before we get started, a quick thank you to our sponsor, Neximo. Neximo provides APIs that let you integrate SMS, voice, just a ton of really cool sort of telecoms-y stuff into your development projects. You can see what they're up to at neximo.com, or you can thank them for sponsoring us on Twitter at NeximoDev. I'm here today with
Rochelle Velho. We're going to talk about space technology in human spaceflight.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about what kind of tech and what kind of support it would take to get humans on longer space voyages than we're going to talk about getting humans to Mars, right?
Yes, exactly. And I mean, that's my main area of interest, is about the medical capability that you need in order to put a human on Mars. But it's all about the journey getting there and all the spin-offs to Earth-based technology and how we can help patients on Earth.
Okay, so it's not just sort of Elon Musk, let's burn all this money and maybe get space people out of it, but like, hey, let's think critically, because is the big problem keeping humans actually alive in long space flight?
Yes, I mean, space is a dangerous arena.
Because of all the monsters.
Of course. All the sci-fi movies.
Killer aliens.
But mainly because of things like radiation, those unseen monsters.
Nice.
And also, I think there are a lot of challenges, not only nutrition-wise, in terms of your bone and muscle physiology, also things like women in space and how we would fare on a long-duration mission to Mars, because things like menstruation, things like being able to exercise in space, those are all important issues that I guess we don't really think about until you start researching this area.
So first, I'm going to ask you to talk to me a little bit about your background and how you got into sending humans into Mars research. But then I really want to dive deeper into this and really talk about like what kinds of challenges specifically exist and what kinds of technologies might be well suited to help bridge those gaps.
For the first question, so I'm a medical doctor in the NHS. So I actually, believe it or not, I am due to start a series of night shifts in A&E and in theatres. So I'm a doctor working in a real hospital with an interest in space medicine. The space medicine side is very much done in my spare time and on a voluntary basis. With regard to this, I've always been interested in it. And
because it's cool.
Because it's amazing, right? And basically, I got into it when I was in secondary school. I started at some space summer schools, which sounds really geeky.
Isn't that geeky? Like 11-year-old me was just extremely jealous.
I don't know. I think when your mum is working full time in a laboratory and she's like, oh, let's just hand you over to the university and let you build rockets for the whole of summer to do my laboratory research. I think that was more the first thing. And
too late to have your mum adopt me?
I will ask her. Whether
you'd be like, so
she has room. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah. So there's this podcast host, and you researching humans. This sounds very abstract when I keep saying humans. We're humans, people. Mm-hmm. So you researching how people would manage getting to Mars. That's a hobby?
Yes, so it sounds absolutely strange, and you would think a doctor probably has enough to do on a day-to-day basis. But it is a hobby, and it has always been a hobby, because in the UK, aviation and aerospace medicine wasn't recognised as a specialty until very recently. It's something that NASA funded, and the aerospace medical training pathway was very established in the States, but it's only coming to the forefront with commercial spaceflight now in the UK and in Europe as a whole. So it's something that I started doing with the Austrian Space Forum a couple of years ago after graduating.
Oh yes, the Austrian Space Forum. There's an Austrian Space Forum?
Yes, the Austrian Space Forum is an organisation that is dedicated to researching about Mars and anything to do with how to get to Mars and to enhance our capabilities in terms of putting people in spacesuit simulators called the Auda X or the Auda S, basically pushing our boundaries and testing different medical tech to see what would actually enhance our abilities to get there, because it's going to be a long journey and there are going to be lots of things that could potentially go wrong and lots of challenges that we might face.
Is it just that working in an A&E, you get to see people subjected to everything they can do to themselves on Earth, where you're like, hey, what happens if we took these people and just flung them into space?
I think that is it, exactly. And I think working in the A&E really gives you a perspective on humanity as a whole. On my last shift, you see things all the way from overdoses to children coming in with little cuts on their fingers.
I thought that was going to be a lot more depressing. Whew.
Well, I could tell you the depressing bits, but I don't think...
We're going to save all of our human misery for the space part. We're going to save it for volunteers.
I mean, you do see cardiac arrests, and as a critical care doctor, you see the other side. You see the long-term management of people who have had a heart attack. And that's how it all started, actually. So my first research project was looking at how can we actually develop different methods to conduct CPR in space, which sounds...
Shut your mouth. No, don't shut it. Tell me more.
I mean, there was a competition by the European Space Agency to actually work out what are the different methods that you could use to do CPR in space. And I wrote an essay just in my spare time.
This is so gloriously nerdy, where it's like, so there was a space contest, there was an essay.
And I decided, you know what, I know a little bit about this. Why don't I come up with different methods of doing CPR in space and work out whether or not other people think the same as me or think differently? And it ended up me going over to Cologne, to the European Space Agency, and actually presenting my ideas to a room of experts. And I was absolutely terrified, I can tell you.
What is that like? Do you have to pantomime a lot? Or is it very, very clinical? And then we strap them down with Velcro.
Well, you eventually do strap them down with Velcro, and you have to have something. And that is the final sort of objective after doing. But the initial stages, which are the most important, they had no solution to, really. So I looked out there and I thought about all the different ways that you could do CPR in space. And one of them is a handstand, which I think is my favorite. Imagine an astronaut like Tim Peake doing a handstand on another astronaut whose heart has just stopped to restart his heart.
It's the person. I'm not going to admit what I thought you were talking about. You put the Velcro gloves on them and then you get them into a handstand. But let's come all the way around.
Mm-hmm.
So far, the technology we've talked about is Velcro.
Yes.
And I am so ready to accept that Velcro may be the answer to a lot of these.
Yeah.
But let's say, just to have a hypothetical scenario, someone loses their damn full mind and I get to go to space. I get to go as far as I can go before my fleshy human body gives out. I'm 30 years old. Our listeners can't see me, so I'm in peak physical condition, like really, really buff.
You are, probably. I don't
know. No, as a disembodied voice, I'm the buffest disembodied voice. And they send me to space. What is going to mess me up physically? And on what kind of timescale? I'm not going to do too well out there long term, am I?
Astronaut selection is really important, and there's a rigorous series of questions, series of different tests you have to undergo, and there's a reason for that. All of these people are marathon runners or athletes, and there's different things that can go wrong with your physiology. From an abstract perspective, you've got psychological repercussions of isolation in the middle of nowhere in space by yourself. We've talked about your heart, so you're more likely to be susceptible to arrhythmias and heart attacks.
You're not really selling Spaceflight, are you?
But
I have a guest on.
Doctors don't really sell things that are dangerous and that can have impacts on your human body.
Yeah, I love how you're like, don't go to space. You still want to go to space. Here's as it's going to kill you, but you still want to go to space.
I'm like one of those adverts on TV. These are the T's and C's. These are all the things that can actually happen to you. It's not like Gravity or Interstellar. This is something completely different.
So this is like a don't try this at home. if you suddenly became a billionaire tech man-child?
Yes, if you were a billionaire and you could go into space, you would have to have a spacesuit in order to actually do your spacewalks outside of the space station. And that's basically like having a whole ventilator within one construct, right? So you have to have all of the tech built in to help you breathe, to actually monitor you, your life signs, your vitals. But also, in a way, there are some spacesuits that have integrated robotic technology that can actually help you walk as well. Because your muscles...
stop right there.
Yeah.
To keep me healthy in space, your pitch is robot suits.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. I love how you were like, don't do this at home. But tell me about my robot suit.
Basically, you can integrate robotic technology to help you walk. Say, when you're doing, I don't know, say the water cooling system broke on the International Space Station. You actually might have to do a spacewalk in order to fix.
I can hear like exciting action movie music in my head. Go. We're doing a spacewalk.
Okay, you're doing a spacewalk, you're out there, but you've nearly reached Mars. So your muscles and bones aren't working as well. So you can't walk as well as you could when you were on Earth. And because of that deconditioning, you need that extra support to help you move in that environment outside of zero gravity. Yes, you've had lots of technology to help you exercise, like the ARED or the FRED machine, which are basically resistant exercise devices that are built specifically for the space station.
This sounds more like rubber band technology than Velcro technology.
This technology is out there. So there's a group at the University of Northumbria who is actually developing the next generation of the ARED, or the resistant exercise device, the FRED. But that device not only helps people like astronauts do their spacewalks hypothetically when they're about to reach Mars and on the ISS at the moment, but also people who have had strokes in hospitals at the moment. So
how interesting.
Rehabilitative. Yeah, it's for rehab as well. So this is work by Dr. Andrew Renard at Northumbria and Nick Kaplan. And they've just taken their work on parabolic flight. So they're actually testing what happens to your muscles and bones when you're in, near to zero gravity, because parabolas don't achieve complete zero gravity, in order to then test their equipment and work out whether or not it is beneficial to astronauts and also stroke patients and other patients in the NHS who need rehab.
And for those of our listeners who are based outside of the UK, it might be valuable to point out that the NHS is sort of the national health service, like a big, almost everybody's doctors, almost everybody's medical services comes through like a central health organization.
Yes, and it's free at the point of contact. So we do treat everyone. So
you saw me just going for an NHS plug right there. Where I was like, come on.
And I'm really proud of it too. So it's good.
I live here for a lot of reasons. Like, the NHS is pretty fantastic. And it gives us brilliant doctors who in their free time research weird space stuff.
Yes.
I've got a robot suit. I've totally fixed that thing, even though I'm not doing great. What other things are going to get me? What other kind of technology can you use to keep me alive despite my own best efforts?
The other technology that we have, so we were talking about CPR, so just to rewind, there are actually mechanical CPR robots that can...
Our robots and Velcro are going to be your fixes for all these, right?
Of course, definitely. And sticky tape while you're at it.
Oh, good. As long as the duct tape was coming out, I'm fine.
I love duct tape. Duct tape's amazing. It fixes everything. There's a device called the Lucas device, which we work on in Birmingham, actually. And paramedics use this device. So you might have seen it on TV. It's used on a lot of football fields. So if there's a footballer who has a cardiac arrest, then we can use the Lucas device to resuscitate them. And the thing is, it provides very good chest compressions for these patients. So then they have a higher chance of actually regaining consciousness.
What does it look like? In my head, it's like a little robot person giving you chest compressions. And that seems terribly unlikely.
I wish it was like R2-D2 or a C-3PO giving CPR on a football field. But
God damn it.
It looks like basically a mechanical pump.
Okay.
You have to have people attach it to that person who's lost consciousness or has had cardiac arrest. But I can send you a picture of it if that's easier to actually.
For you, dear listener, if you're just listening to this right now, if you've joined us on our Twitter stream at Pursuit Pod, we're going to have a graphical representation of our whole chat. And we'll try and fit in, if our artist is patient, maybe a picture of this.
The Lucas device.
The Lucas device.
It's like a CPR robot, basically, which is quite cool. And I've actually used it and I've taught people to use it. And it's something that we are rolling out within A&Es in the NHS. And people don't really know about it. But it's something that I think is really important for spaceflight and for long duration spaceflight to Mars. Going back to your sort of dream spacesuit, the other thing are non-invasive monitoring devices. There's a lot of technology out there, but it's not wireless. And by developing, you actually have that capability to just put maybe a little finger pulse monitor and also like a necklace to monitor all your vitals, to monitor your blood pressure, etc. And by developing that technology, we can remotely monitor patients within a hospital setting. They're already doing this within certain hospitals in the UK, but they're testing out tech, which is wireless, which the patient can get attached to and walk around, and they're not attached to streams of wires, basically, to measure their ECG and their blood pressure and their heart rate, etc. So I think telemonitoring and telemedicine is really important. And it's something that's spinning from the Earth setting to space, but also from the space setting to the Earth field. And tele-robotic surgery is another thing that's definitely important. So you might want to take a tele-robot with you as well if you want to do any surgery.
I have never heard a phrase that I was more delighted by and terrified by at the same time. Did you say tele-robotic surgery?
Yes. So it's something that I've actually seen. And say you have something on Earth like a prostate operation in urology, they can actually do that using the Da Vinci robot or tele-robotic surgery. At the moment, it's way too heavy to take to the moon, to a lunar base, or to Mars. But it's something that's being developed. And I think in 20, 30 years, maybe sooner, I hope, you can actually take that with you to Mars and via I don't know, whatever satellite communication we establish on Mars, which is not up to me, we can actually contact surgeons on Earth to direct people who are non-medical to autonomously or non-autonomously conduct surgery.
I love how you were very casual. Like this was an understood thing where you're like, well, of course we'll have the moon base. Where I was like, okay, we get a moon base. Do you feel like that's a necessary step before getting to Mars? Is like having, I guess, the space equivalent of a 3-yard head start?
I think that it is personally, and
because it's cool.
Yes, it is definitely cool and it's achievable. It's an achievable objective. And I think it's smart to do that first because we can actually test out different habitats, like lunar habitats, before making that jump to Mars.
It's sort of like having your first camping trip in the front yard. Yeah.
I mean, in the UK, we do the Duke of Edinburgh, and it's like doing the Duke of Edinburgh bronze or silver before going on to gold and climbing Mount Snowdon or whatever you're going to do as part of your
That
goal.
was so decidedly British that I'm not sure where to start unpacking that. For listeners who are not based in Britain, we're talking about awards you get for man, help me out.
So
the Duke of Edinburgh are like graded awards that you get for doing outdoorsy stuff or community stuff.
Yes.
It's like the Americans. It's like the presidential fitness thing, but it's more than doing 5 sit-ups.
Yeah, it's definitely more than doing 5 sit-ups. Mine involved 5 rainy days in Wales that I was trying to navigate around.
I mean, Wales, the country, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately because Wales, but unfortunately not giant sea creatures.
No. Wales, the country, definitely.
That seemed terribly likely.
I'm just imagining these giant sea creatures and having to tame them as part of my Duke of Edinburgh, but obviously that's not what we're...
Anyway, the moon base is going to give us a good chance to get stuff set up, to test out our tech, to make sure all our Velcro works really well.
Yes, definitely. And apart from Velcro, I mean, there's so much other tech out there. Like I was saying earlier, and what I say to other people is it's not the final technology that's necessarily the most beneficial to humankind. I mean, I recently attended a summit in Vienna as part of the UN Space 50, and we were talking about how satellites can actually map out infectious disease. And it's all about predictive technology using AI. And I know AI is used in lots of different contexts, but basically machine learning algorithms to try and map out and predict where diseases are going to spread. Now, this is really important for diseases like Ebola, which everyone's probably heard of.
Yeah.
It's something that we can actually help people on the ground to see, okay, so it's going to move to this part of the world next. And therefore, we need to put in preventative measures within those areas to try and reduce the spread and to actually maybe stop contamination between individuals at a local level, but by looking at a global level to start with. I think space technology and the spin-offs to Earth, by developing that technology to go to the moon or further beyond the moon, are really important to actually help facilitate remote medicine, infectious disease, and physiotherapy, and of stroke patients and geriatrics. There's so many different unseen benefits that I think need to be highlighted a bit more by the space agencies.
No, I love this. So I was already willing to just buy in completely. Like, yes, we need to go into space because it's cool. And then you trot it out like, hey, look at all the different robots we get. But then you're telling me that we do have some really valuable technology, some really valuable practices that would improve life potentially for people here.
Oh, definitely.
I think when we look back at the original space race, the technologies we got out of that and the practices, a lot of them being like medical technologies.
Oh, definitely.
Are things we kind of don't remember coming out of the space race. It'd be really nice to have another without the Cold War stuff.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's already happening. I think that developing nations or less economically developed countries, there's different like labels. Basically, there are countries that are becoming forerunners in the space race, and places like China, India, and other players are coming to the forefront. The Australians have just launched their space agency as well, which is something that you would thought already existed, given that Australia has a vast expanse that it can do launches from. But it's
I love how you've got all of this mapped out. You're like, okay, I got it. Australia, they've got the space. They're cool with it. We're just going to grab all our stuff and head down.
They do. They have the capabilities, they have the investors, and they have the funding to actually have a space agency. And until recently, they didn't have one. And I think space is becoming more important, and people are realizing that actually there's a lot of technology based within the space industry that can help benefit humankind, but also it's that passion that comes with human exploration and wanting to see more out there. I sound very Star Trek at the moment, but
You're like, I have not seen any Star Trek. I was going to say To Boldly Go, but is that the one?
Yes, it is, definitely.
Oh, thank you.
But basically, I think that people have always wanted to explore, and we've always had voyages, and we wouldn't have been able to circumnavigate the Earth without having that drive to explore. And I think space is just that next step to human exploration, with exploring our seas, because I'm a great fan of David Attenborough. But I think for people who...
I love how you're just like, put people in robot suits and then put them everywhere.
Oh, that would be amazing, yes. But I think in 100 years or so, we will see cities on the moon, we'll see cities on Mars. And for me, that's really exciting. And hopefully, if my life expectancy carries on increasing, depending on healthcare, then I would love to see that one day and love to visit those cities if I had the opportunity.
So let's say, just hypothetically, because I'm not completely in love with the idea of doing research that gets humans way, way out into space. But, just hypothetically, you've mentioned a lot of different organizations that are doing research and they're doing really cool things. Can you sort of recap what kinds of organizations or what kinds of, research groups our dear listener, who's a technologist, who's got these really valuable skills, might be able to get involved with?
Yes, so I guess you can sort of classify them into from a governmental agency level. So there's agencies that people know about like NASA and the European Space Agency. You've got JAXA, which is the Japanese. You've got the Russians. So you've got Roscosmos, etc. You've also got universities in the UK, for example. You've got King's College London. You've got Northumbria. And from an engineering perspective, you've got Strathclyde as well and Cranwell, etc. But you've also got the commercial entities, which I think are becoming more important in terms of their role in developing tech for space and space medicine in general. So you've got such a variety of tech, from app developers, apps for telemedical capabilities, to people who are developing hardware. There are a lot of companies, small and large, who are developing hardware to make this technology available not only to people who are researching space medicine, but also people who want to apply this and make the lives of people in hospitals easier.
So that's very cool. Can you think of any companies that you would love to be like, hey, take a look at this, they're doing this?
There's one company that's called Planet, which I don't know whether you've heard of, but they're basically using a lot of satellite technology and the data stream from satellites in order to map weather events. I know it's very abstract, but actually weather is very important from a medical point of view.
Okay.
Because if there are any medical, then you need to be able to deploy the personnel on the ground to actually deal with those weather events. So, for example, if there was a tsunami, you would want medics and healthcare professionals, but also ambulances, NGOs on the ground to try and help people in the aftermath of tsunamis and major catastrophic events as a result of weather. Earthquakes as well, and the other things are volcanic eruptions, etc., which can cause lots of medical emergencies and patients who need the medical care in remote settings.
I love the emotional roller coaster chatting to you is because you're like, oh, well, here's this very cool setup, space, or I don't know, volcanoes, but also it's very sad because it impacts people. Yeah, where I was like, cool, volcano. Yes, the health implications.
Yes, it's not all bad. There are lots of interesting things that you can learn using GPS technology that we take for granted. So our mobile phones and how we're harnessing them for remote healthcare. There are some organizations that look at people in the middle of the Amazon, and there's a lot of researchers who look into this, but they don't have access and that infrastructure to go to a hospital if something goes wrong. So Skype technology and video messaging for general practitioners within Brazil and also in different arenas. So it doesn't just have to be the Amazon. It can be in Africa, in very remote settings where they don't have medical capabilities. And they can send over an ECG and I can look at it here and actually give my opinion. And actually, interestingly, this was something that we did need when we were in Oman. So when I did my recent expedition to Oman, testing out the spacesuit simulators with the Austrian
Wait, you what? Wait? What?
So
you've gotten very used to saying incredibly cool things incredibly casually, haven't you?
Well, I think it's because I guess you forget that you work in this incredibly privileged area, which is so cool, but you just sort of...
So I was testing robot spacesuits. Oh, so tired.
So when you say it like that, well done, Jessica. So basically, we were with the Austrian Space Forum. They had a lot of different commercial partners and also university partners, but we were testing out a spacesuit simulator, which enables us to see how astronauts or analog astronauts behave in that environment, in a desert, in the middle of nowhere. And I was basically looking at a dashboard, which gave me all of their vitals, including their ECG. Now, one example was we weren't sure about a certain ECG. We weren't sure whether it was something that was harmful or not. And you need a cardiology review for that. Within medicine, there are 160 different specialties. So you can't be a specialist in everything. And so what we did was we actually emailed with encryption this ECG over to a specialist in Oxford who had a look at it and said, no, that's fine, it's all right. And it's something like that that can actually benefit people in the middle of nowhere who have no access to healthcare. That is an example of telemedicine in itself. And you would think, oh, it's just email or it's just an app. But actually, it's really important. And it's that software that's just as important as the hardware that we develop. So, and the other thing that we got to do is we've developed a lot of communication technology in the different iterations of the suit. So for the last mission, the Mars analog mission that we did was on top of a glacier. You have to have certain things built into the suit so that the astronaut can communicate with you, but not only with you, with the other astronaut in the other suit next to them, because they can't hear them if the communication is off. So it's something that really interests me is autonomous medicine. And you need to be, if you're not medically trained and you're on Mars, on the surface of Mars, then you need to be able to know.
Oh, yeah. So we've got all the way to the surface of Mars now. So we had our bones disintegrating and muscles and needed special robots. And then we had our heart attacked up. We're at Mars now. Okay.
So you've basically solved all the problems and the challenges that go with that long duration mission. And you've got to Mars. And say you're not medically trained and you're in the suit, then you need to be able to know whether or not you're getting sicker or your vitals are okay, but you don't have anybody medical with you because of the time delay in communication. So we've actually developed an early warning score, which compiles all of the data that comes from the suit, the health data, and it comes up with a number or a red, yellow, green, just a traffic light to actually tell astronauts whether or not they're sick or not sick. More importantly, what we're developing at the moment is looking into whether or not the other astronaut, the buddy astronaut, can actually flag up whether the other person is getting sick. So these early warning scores would be delivered not only to yourself, but to your buddy who's with you. And it's to try and mitigate against any deterioration. You don't know why you're sick, but you may have the ability to recognize that you are getting sick and need to get back to base. And I think that's really important. And that's something that's actually a spin-off from hospitals anyway. So we do use early warning scores and systems, and they're different ones in different parts of the world, but they're all the same premise. They're basically to try and amalgamate all of that data that you get from health technology and to then assimilate that into what's going on. But you don't need to be medically trained to do that. You can actually, it's like a signpost. You're sick. Go back to base. Basically.
Fantastic. Like, I love the sort of video game setup as well, where it's like, the red light's on. We're going to go back to base and re-up.
Exactly.
This has been an absolutely fantastic talk, and it's been fascinating. If our listeners, like I do, want to know way, way more about the kind of research you're doing and everything about space and more about terrifying CPR robots, is there some place they can find you online?
So I'm on Twitter, so you can find me on Twitter. And we also have a website called Space Lab, so the Life and Biomedical Sciences Association, where you can find out a bit more information. And the ESA Space for Health website is fantastic because it gives you an idea of all the health tech that's out there and all the spin-offs, potential spin-offs into and out of the health technology setting.
Fantastic. Everybody go check it out. Where are you on Twitter? Or who are you on Twitter?
Who am I on Twitter? I am Space Rocky, so Astro Space Rocky. You can just find me on Twitter.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to keep up with what we're doing at the Pursuit Podcast, you can find us on Twitter @PursuitPod. Please do join us again on Thursday for a brand new episode.